Hey guys, welcome back to Force StarCraft 2 Strategy. This is of course Force, and today we're going to be taking a look at a Zerg strategy. And basically what we're going to be looking at today is a little bit different than what we typically see. A lot of times what we look at are kind of quick and decisive strategies to take out your opponent early in the game. And yes, those are great. Yes, that's kind of something you want to learn and learn how to implement. It's obviously going to make your game shorter, maybe more enjoyable. Typically those type of games tend to be very micro-intensive. But today we're going to be taking a look at kind of a long, drawn-out, macro-heavy game. Long and drawn-out, kind of like that intro that I just gave you. Basically, in this strategy, we're taking a look at a macro-heavy game, lots of expanding. We're going to be taking a look at when to expand, why we're expanding, the reasons behind the things that we're doing. Now, in this particular strategy we play, the Zerg player that we're going to be taking a look at is Dally Lamer, and our Protoss opponent is Twee. These are both very good players, so we're just going to go ahead and go straight into Dally Lamer vision, because this is again a Zerg strategy that we're going to be looking at. So yeah, basically, we're looking at these longer games. These tend to go about under a few different circumstances, one of which is if you just happen to be in a game where both players are more comfortable in a macro-intensive game, so neither of them really goes for too hard of an early push, or if you have an early push that doesn't succeed, but it wasn't an all-in push, and a counterattack isn't really going to be effective from your opponent, then it typically turns into a macro-intensive game where both players have to expand at that point, or else they're going to fall behind of their opponent. So taking a look here at this particular build before we get into more of this discussion about the macro-intensive games, we started off with that fast extractor at 14, and then followed up with a 14 spawning pool. Again, getting that extractor first so we can get up to that 100 Vespian and have various amounts of tech options. Now we are of course scouting with our Overlord. The good thing about this particular map, Scrap Station, is that if you're a Zerg player, of course, you can scout with your Overlord instead of having to sacrifice the minerals by sending out an early drone, because these bases are so close. You can get your Overlord in there before he's going to have anything up that it's going to be able to kill it with. He's not going to have any stalkers out anytime soon. So now taking a look here, what we see, a few things to note here. We do see two gateways. This tells us that we're likely to be seeing some two-gate pressure from Zealots, and of course we see the Zealot heading out towards our base. It's very unlikely that he's moving down here just to pick daisies or do anything of the sort. We can kind of expect, in seeing him move out, that we're going to be getting some pressure, so we are of course going to need to respond by getting some Zerglings. And that's something to note too, that we didn't start producing these Zerglings until we saw that he was going to push out. If it looked like he was just going straight for macro and going to intensively drone up and go for a strong economy, and he wasn't going to push out, then we wouldn't have had to make so many Zerglings. But of course we did see that push coming, so we did in turn go for some Zerglings. We have these 6 here, and we do also have our first queen coming out, second queen en route. Something else to note about this second queen production, I'm just going to try to cover as much as I can in this game as far as reasons behind doing things. But second queen production, that's going to do a few things for us. Obviously it's going to allow us to spread creep. We only need one queen for the spawn larva ability. It's going to allow us to spread some creep, but it's also going to protect us against void rays. I've had a lot of people ask me about how to fend off early game void rays from a Protoss opponent, and as Zerg, the way you would do that is queens. Queens are going to do very well early on in the game versus 2 or 3 void rays. So just get a few queens. You should be pretty safe with the transfuse ability. Now getting some more Zerglings, again, because we do see this hard push coming now, we do know that we're going to be getting hit pretty hard. We also see this block off here, and I'm going to go back to that in a moment. So as you can see, he's moving up with the Zealots. We're going to try to micro out queens. We definitely don't want to lose those. Those are very, very vital to the success of this gameplay. Spawn larva, spread creep, both things we really need. Losing a queen is not something you want to do. Now we do see, in this particular situation, with the amount of Zealots he has and the amount of Zerglings we have, we're going to be successful in an attack. So we push out on him, we take out his Zealots, because he doesn't have enough to just completely mop over our Zerglings. And as long as we can get a surround, as long as they're not in a choke point and the Zerglings are running in single file, then they're going to do really well against these Zealots. Anywhere you can get a situation where your Zerglings can get a surround on your enemy's army, you're likely to be in the better position there. So again, we do see this wall off, and a few other things to note. He did drop a forge down here, and we know that for certain because we do see this photon cannon coming up, and he of course needs a forge to drop a photon cannon. And we also have this photon cannon here. Excellent positioning by the Protoss player. Putting this choke here is going to allow him to pretty safely expand really quickly on, And again, that's something to note in seeing this choke and in seeing that he's protecting these debris right here with a photon cannon that was just up right there. We know that he is likely to be expanding very early, so we in turn are going to expand ourselves. We don't want to fall behind in economy. It's going to be very hard for us to break through this with this photon cannon wall, with this photon cannon sitting up here as well. So instead of just trying to go for a baneling bust and break through and throwing all of our resources towards that, we're instead going to go ahead and go for this expansion. And again, that is mainly because it's kind of, again, one of those stylistic choices where we could choose to try to go all in and try to kill him right now. But the thing to note about that is if that fails, we're going to be in a very weak position. If we were to go for a baneling bust here and try to break right through this, and it were to fail and he were to fend it off, then we'd be in a very, very weak position. And that's kind of the general idea behind going for that macro heavy expansion type game. So we do know that he is likely to expand, so again, we have decided to expand ourselves. We are also at this point teching up to a layer, so we're getting ready to move into the later stages of the game, the mid to late stages of the game. As of now, as you can see, you know, we're 8 minutes into the game here, in game time, which is about 6 minutes in real time. But we're about 8 minutes game time into the game, and we haven't created much more than Zerglings. And that's something you should really take note of, that it's not really necessary to amass this giant army early on, as long as you have necessary scouting information. I mean, we are still inside of his base. I'm going to say this is a blunder on Tweet's part, the fact that he hasn't at least built one stalker to kill this overlord and get that out of his base, basically. And we also have these Zerglings outside of the front of his base, so we know that nothing's coming anytime soon. We have a pretty good idea of everything that he's doing at this point. And I think something to note too is, in not seeing stalkers earlier, that also kind of tells us that there's very likely to be an expansion right here. We don't know for certain, but it's very plausible. It's very likely, because there's not much else going on inside of his base. He has this wall off here. We know that there's a cannon sitting right there, and that's pretty much all we see at this point. So we're just going to take a quick look, and there you go. Suspicions confirmed. We don't know that as a player yet, but this just to give you an idea of, in seeing a situation like this and not seeing much else and not even seeing any stalkers at that point, we kind of know that expansion is very likely. Now, as you can see, we're going ahead and getting another expansion as well. Now we're doing this because at this point we feel pretty safe. We feel like we have a pretty decent map control. He is kind of boxed into this spot here. There's not much he's going to be able to do. He has to kill off either these destructible rocks, this debris here, or one of these buildings in order to get units through. So for the time being, we feel pretty safe. Again, we have this scouting information outside of his base. We're just basically macroing up. As you can see here, dropping these 2 evolution chambers. We do have a Hydralisk Den up right now. So we started off with just those Zerglings, the Speedlings. We went to the front of his base, we tested it, we saw if there was any chance we could break through. We know at this point there is no chance we're going to be able to break through anytime soon, so then we decided to go for that expansion. We decided to build up a strong economy and then work from there and decide what we're going to do from there. But again, I mean, as you can see, we still don't have a ton of units on the board. You're going to take a look at this unit counter. We do have these Zerglings that are still sitting outside of his base. These are more or less just scouting Zerglings. They're going to tell us when he's pushing out. And then, I mean, that's it. No other really offensive. We have one Hydralisk as well, so there you go. And again, a lot of people might be kind of scared by that. They're going to say, well, what if he pushes out with this huge attack? Well, we still haven't, we've been scouting his base, we still haven't seen much, and in fact at this point, now that we have that layer up, we're bringing this Overseer. The idea is to drop a Changeling and move it inside of his base, but obviously he did see that we were doing that, so that was unsuccessful. I think the better option may have been to try to drop a Changeling up here and then run it through to check all the tech, but again, you know, it's not that big of a deal. We're just going for that really strong economy, and we're preparing for creating units when it's necessary. Because again, up until this point, it really hasn't been necessary. He's still been boxed in. He hasn't pushed out much. He hasn't done much. That's because he himself is trying to build up an army. He himself is, you know, going to be going. In fact, what we're going to end up seeing is he's going for that regular default Protoss ground army with Sentry Stalkers, Zealots, and then we're also going to be seeing some Colossi, or some Coloxin, or some Colossus. We're going to be seeing some of those guys, multiple Colossus, and we're also going to be seeing some High Templars as well. Now, both those units do very well against this mix that we have, but we're going to counteract the fact that we're seeing Colossus by getting Corruptors, and that's kind of one of those response scenarios, and that's kind of one of those things where when we see that he's coming out with that, then we're going to go ahead and respond by getting those Colossus. So taking a look here, we still have this one Zergling. We did pull the majority of our force down here, just kind of sitting back, just kind of playing cozy. And I know right now the type of comments we're going to be getting. There's going to be some people saying, "Well, that was the most boring game ever. Both these players are horrible." That is in case not the fact. Both these players are very, very strong. They both play in a lot of tournaments. I've seen them in multiple pro tourneys, and they both do very well. Dally Lamer especially. So this is something that's not too off keel. This is not just Bronze League play right here. These are both very